When my parents' lawyer finished reading the will, everyone in the room looked at me. Nobody expected me to smile, especially after what I'd just heard. 2 months later, my younger brother called and said 7 words that changed everything. Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm 37 years old and I live in Indianapolis with my husband, David, and our 11-year-old son, Ethan. I've worked as an accountant for nearly 15 years. It's not the kind of job people dream about, but it's given us something I've always valued more than luxury: stability. David teaches high school science. He's the kind of person who stays calm even when life gets messy. And over the years, he's become the steady voice that keeps our family grounded. I also have a younger brother named Jason. Growing up, Jason and I were close. He was outgoing, funny, and could make friends anywhere. I was quieter, more organized, usually the one making plans while he lived in the moment. Our parents, Robert and Helen, loved us both deeply. They always said that no matter what happened in life, family should take care of each other. I believed that without question. Everything changed after Dad retired. Not long after, Mom was diagnosed with a heart condition. Thankfully, it wasn't life-threatening, but the appointments, medication, and extra medical bills quickly became overwhelming on a fixed retirement income. One evening, David and I sat at the kitchen table reviewing our budget. "We can help them," I said. He looked at the numbers for a moment before nodding. "It might mean cutting back on a few things." "I know, but they're your parents," he replied. "We'll make it work." And we did. We started sending money every month. Sometimes it helped cover medical bills. Sometimes it went toward groceries or the mortgage. When their water heater failed during the winter, we paid to replace it. We never kept score. We never asked for anything in return. In fact, my parents often thanked us and reminded us not to tell Jason. "He already has enough to worry about," Mom would always say. At the time, that seemed reasonable. I thought we were simply protecting him from extra stress. Looking back now, I wish I had asked one simple question, because if I had, everything that happened later might have been very different. Helping my parents soon became part of our routine. On the first Friday of every month, I'd transfer money into Dad's account before paying our own bills. Some months it was only enough to cover groceries. Other months it paid for Mom's medication, a leaking roof, or an unexpected repair around the house. David and I adjusted our lives without complaining. We drove the same cars for years. We postponed remodeling our kitchen. We even canceled the family vacation twice, because my parents needed a new furnace before winter. Whenever I apologized to Ethan for delaying another trip, he'd simply shrug and say, "Grandma needs it more." Hearing that from an 11-year-old always reminded me we were making the right choice. My parents thanked us every chance they got. But there was one thing they always repeated. "Please don't tell Jason," Mom would say. "We don't want him to feel guilty." I never questioned it. Jason had always struggled to stay financially stable. He bounced between jobs, rented different apartments every couple of years, and seemed to believe things would eventually work themselves out. I assumed my parents were just protecting him. Then one Sunday, we all gathered for Dad's birthday. After dinner, everyone was sitting in the backyard when Dad raised his glass. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he said. "I don't know what your mother and I would do without Jason." I looked up, confused. Dad smiled proudly at my brother. He's always checking on us, and whenever we've needed help, he never lets us down. Everyone applauded. Jason smiled awkwardly but didn't say anything. I glanced at Mom, expecting her to correct him. She didn't. For a second, I wondered if I had misunderstood. Maybe Dad wasn't talking about money. Maybe he meant something else. So I stayed quiet. On the drive home, David noticed I hadn't said a word. "What's bothering you?" I stared out the window. "I think Dad believes Jason's been helping them financially." David frowned. "Do you think your brother told them that?" "I don't know. And honestly, I don't know which answer scares me more. Because if Jason had taken credit for our sacrifices, that was one kind of betrayal. But if my parents had somehow forgotten, who had stood beside them all those years, that might hurt even more. A few days after Dad's birthday, I stopped by my parents' house during my lunch break. Mom had called earlier that morning, asking if I could pick up one of her prescriptions. When I arrived, Dad's truck wasn't in the driveway. I assumed he was running errands. Using the spare key they had given me years ago, I walked inside and placed the medication on the kitchen counter. Just as I was about to leave, I heard voices coming from the living room. It was Mom and Jason. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but then I heard my name. "I still don't think we should tell Sarah," Mom said quietly. Jason sighed. "She'll find out eventually." "I know," Mom replied, "but after everything she's done for us, I don't want her to feel like we've taken her for granted." I froze. Jason spoke again. "I never asked you to hide it." "I know you didn't," Mom answered. "Your father and I made that decision together." My heart started racing. "Hide what?" Mom continued. "Every time Sarah helped us, your father felt embarrassed. He kept saying a parent shouldn't depend on their child. So whenever friends or relatives asked how we were managing, he told them you were helping us." There was a long silence. Then Jason spoke so softly I almost missed it. "I told Dad more than once to tell the truth." "I know," Mom whispered, "but your father is stubborn." I leaned against the hallway wall, trying to process everything. Jason hadn't stolen the credit. He had tried to give it back. It was Dad who couldn't accept that his oldest daughter had become the one keeping the family afloat. For the first time, I wasn't angry with my brother. I was hurt by the quiet pride that had slowly rewritten our family story. Before they could see me, I slipped out the front door and sat in my car. I didn't start the engine. I just stared through the windshield. Everything suddenly made sense. The birthday toast, the awkward look on Jason's face, the silence every time Mom told me not to mention the money. They weren't protecting Jason. They were protecting Dad's pride. But I couldn't stop wondering, if he could pretend Jason had been helping all those years, what else had he convinced himself to believe? After overhearing my parents' conversation, I didn't confront anyone. Not my mother, not my father, not even Jason. I needed time to think. Over the next year, life settled into a familiar routine. David and I continued helping my parents whenever they needed us. But something inside me had changed. I no longer expected appreciation. I simply did it because I loved them. Jason also started visiting them more often. Sometimes he'd mow the lawn. Other times he'd take Dad to doctor's appointments or fix things around the house. For the first time in years, it felt like we were both supporting our parents in different ways. Then, one cold November morning, my phone rang. It was Mom. Her voice was shaking. "Sarah, your father collapsed this morning." My heart stopped. David drove me to the hospital without saying a word. By the time we arrived, Dad was gone. The following week passed in a blur of funeral arrangements, relatives, and old family friends sharing stories I'd never heard before. Despite everything that had happened, I missed him terribly. He wasn't a perfect father, but he was still my dad. A month later, the lawyer called. It was time to read Dad's will. The room was quiet as everyone took their seats. Mom sat beside Jason, holding a tissue in her hands. The lawyer opened the folder and began reading. Dad had left a few personal belongings to extended family members. His tools went to Jason. Mom would remain in the house for the rest of her life. Then came the part everyone had been waiting for. Upon Helen's passing, the lawyer continued, the family home, remaining savings, and all other major assets shall pass to my son, Jason. Silence filled the room. I didn't look at Jason. I didn't look at Mom. I simply stared at the table. After nearly 10 years of helping my parents stay afloat, after every sacrifice David and I had made, Dad had still chosen to leave almost everything to my younger brother. The lawyer looked at me gently. "Sarah, your father also left you this." He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written across the front. I held it in my hands but didn't open it. Not there, not in front of everyone. I stood up, smiled at Jason, and quietly said, "Congratulations." Then I walked out of the office. Outside, David was waiting by the car. He took one look at my face and knew. Without asking a single question, he simply opened his arms, and for the first time since Dad's funeral, I cried. That evening, after Ethan had gone to bed, I finally opened the envelope Dad had left for me. It wasn't long, just one handwritten page. "Dear Sarah, If you're reading this, then I'm no longer here to tell you these words myself. I know this will hurt you. You deserved more recognition than I ever gave you. Tears blurred the ink as I kept reading. You spent years helping your mother and me, and I noticed every sacrifice. I simply wasn't good at saying it. I made the decision to leave the house to Jason because he has never been financially stable. You and David built a life through hard work, and I believed you would be okay without it. Whether that decision was right or wrong, only time will answer that. But I hope one day you'll forgive me. I'm proud of the woman you've become. Love, Dad. I folded the letter and quietly placed it back in the envelope. For the first time in months, I wasn't angry anymore. I was disappointed, but I finally understood why he'd made his decision. It wasn't about loving Jason more. It was about worrying that Jason couldn't stand on his own. Life slowly moved on. Mom remained in the family home, and Jason visited her almost every day. David and I focused on our own lives. Then, exactly 2 months later, my phone rang. Jason. The moment I answered, I knew something was wrong. Sarah, I don't know what to do. What happened? His voice cracked. Mom had a stroke this morning. She's stable, but she can't live alone anymore. He took a deep breath. I've been trying to handle everything myself. The medical appointments, the house, my job. I can't do it alone. There was a long silence before he quietly said, Mom needs you. I closed my eyes. For a second, all I could think about was the lawyer's office, the will, the letter, the years of sacrifice. Then I remembered something Dad had always told us growing up. Family takes care of family. Not because it's always fair, but because someday we all need someone. The next morning, David and I drove to Mom's house. Jason opened the door. He looked exhausted. Without saying a word, he hugged me. I'm sorry, he whispered. I should have spoken up years ago. I hugged him back. We can't change the past, but we can decide what happens next. Over the following months, we worked together to care for Mom. Jason handled the house. I managed her medical care and finances. For the first time in years, we weren't keeping score. We were simply siblings helping the person who had raised us. Looking back now, I still wish things had been different. But Dad's greatest mistake wasn't the will. It was waiting too long to tell me.